Hello and welcome to Mickeyology. I'm Austin Wrathall, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different than I have done in the past, and I'm going to share with you some of my own background and the origins of this channel. I am a middle school history teacher. I teach social studies, and my bachelor's degree was in teaching social sciences. And one day, while I was in college, I was talking to my roommate, and we were just having conversation at our apartment, just shooting the breeze, and my roommate, who was not a teaching major, asked me an interesting question. He asked if there was one class you could teach or create once you're a teacher, what would it be? And I thought about it, and I told him I would like to create a class where I use Disney movies to teach world history, because so many Disney movies take place in real historical times and places. And we both thought that was an interesting idea. However, I didn't think I would actually get to teach such a class unless I became a university professor at some point and was able to create a college course, because schools don't exactly demand a Disney history course when they look to hire history teachers. However, a few years later, I graduated and I found myself working for some smaller schools. And smaller schools are always seeking elective courses that they can offer to students. And electives can be challenging for smaller schools because they don't always have the staff, funding, or facilities to do a lot of extracurricular programs or elective classes. But they still need to offer courses that can fill out a student's course catalog and offer them something besides just the core subjects that they can take during the day. So the school that I was working for came to me, as they will often do at small schools, and they said, is there a class that you could come up with, an elective class that you could teach that would only require the same classroom that you teach history in, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money, and students would sign up for it? Is there such a class that you could come up with? Please let us know. And I thought back on the class idea that I had come up with years ago, and I submitted my idea for a class, and they accepted it. And the class was called History Through Disney. And in that class, I used Disney movies to teach middle school students real-world history. In this class, students would study Disney movies and get to know the history behind the film. For example, in our class, we did a unit on Hercules, where they were able to learn about the timeline of ancient Greece. They learned about the various locations that were important in the ancient Greek world. They studied Greek architecture and Greek mythology, and they completed an assignment where they compared the original Hercules myth to the story as told by Disney. Now, having kids study Disney films in school might seem like a waste of time at first. However, films, and Disney films in particular, tend to engage young students in a way few other materials do. So I would like to explain why, whether you are a school teacher, a homeschool parent, or a young student yourself, you should consider using Disney films when teaching history. Disney movies are entertaining and memorable. They are made by some of the best storytellers and artists in the business, and many of us, especially kids, have fond memories of Disney films because we saw them in our most formative years, and we saw them with friends or family members with whom we share personal connections. So, Disney movies tend to be very meaningful to the audience. Disney stories are also very accessible and engaging. Disney tends to tell stories that are very neat, very coherent, that follow a single protagonist as they go on a quest to make a dream come true. The characters usually drive the story and cause the major events that we see on screen to occur. And the characters themselves are always archetypal. In Disney movies, we tend to have noble heroes, scheming villains, comic sidekicks, and also beautiful love interests. And each of those characters has unique and engaging personalities. When you add in comedic dialogue and catchy songs and beautiful animation into the mix, then it's no wonder why so many people worldwide find Disney movies so engaging and why the Disney brand has become so powerful and popular. History textbooks and lectures, on the other hand, often fail to make this type of connection. That is not because history is inherently boring, far from it, nor do I think that teachers and textbooks should take all of the blame. Rather, I think it is because history is simply a complex subject and learning it is not easy. Especially nowadays, a good history class will require students to see the past and examine it from a bird's eye view, examining several different sources to understand an event and question the limitations and biases of each of those sources. In my opinion, this is a very good thing because it will teach students to think critically, to view the past in all of its complexity, and prepare them to navigate the information age and question the many sources they will encounter outside of school. On the other hand, all of this can make history feel very inaccessible to students, particularly young students. Unlike a good Disney yarn, the stories that we tell in history class tend to be complex and ambiguous. The stories tend to come to us in fragments from sources that contradict one another. The characters in the stories tend to be neither hero nor villain, but complex human beings who fall somewhere in between on that spectrum. And the events in the stories sometimes have no clear cause and are often the result of impersonal forces rather than the actions of a single character. So, when students move out of elementary school and we force them to deal with a more complicated version of history than they have had in the past, they can often struggle to see the human stories that now lie hidden between the lines. Add in unfamiliar vocabulary, graded assignments, and political and ideological groups always seeking to meddle with history curriculum, and it's no wonder why so many students find history inaccessible and why so many teachers, myself included, struggle to get students to engage with the material. That is why I love historical fiction and films, especially Disney films, and it's why I found my little Disney class to be effective at teaching history. Studying historical fiction can be a springboard into learning historical fact. Studying historical fiction allows students to engage with characters and stories while absorbing historical information by a sort of osmosis. They make history relevant to students and they allow them to visualize distant cultures and events. This is especially true of Disney movies because their stories tend to be so engaging and meaningful, and because, at least in the suburban United States, so many students are already familiar with those stories, making it easier to get them to engage with the material. While it can be hard for students to care about the cultures of prehistoric North America, it can be hard for them not to care about an Inuit boy who is turned into a bear and has to learn selflessness from an orphaned bear cub. It can be hard to engage with the history of Chinese dynasties and the building of the Great Wall, but it can be hard not to engage with the story of a Chinese girl who must join the army posing as a man to save her homeland from evil Huns who have just crossed the Great Wall and are bent on overthrowing the ruling dynasty. Once you get students to engage with a story, especially a meaningful one that might have a little bit of nostalgia attached to it, in my experience, it is much easier to get them to then engage with the history behind the story. Suddenly they have a reason to study the indigenous cultures of prehistoric North America and Chinese dynasties and landmarks, because all that stuff is now connected to the story that they like. It also makes them feel smarter, because when they go back and look at the movie, they can see it with new eyes and they can pick up on all the historical Easter eggs and references that the animators put in there. Students also love learning what's inaccurate about the movie and learning what the filmmakers got right and what they got wrong, because suddenly it makes them feel like an expert on the material. And maybe they can even think, wow, I must be even more knowledgeable about this than the filmmakers because I know something about this history that these guys must have missed because it's not in the movie. So all of this suddenly makes them feel more connected to the material. They feel like an expert on it, like they're in the know. And suddenly learning this stuff does not feel like such a chore, and it doesn't feel like the door is closed to them any longer. Of course, Disney movies are not the only historical films or historical fiction that you can use to engage students with history. However, they do have several advantages over other material. The films tend to be more age appropriate more often than other material. They are almost all high quality. And in the age of streaming especially, the movies are more readily accessible than other historical films tend to be. Disney films also depict many different cultures and historical events, and the selection seems to get broader every year with the movies that Disney releases. These movies can spark students' curiosity and teach them about topics that we tend to ignore in our core history courses. For example, few students were asking questions about Polynesian wayfinders or Colombian refugees, and few teachers had any material to teach about those topics before. But now, with Moana and Encanto, teachers have material they can use to teach about this, and these stories are already getting students curious about these topics that they normally would never know about. Another great thing about these Disney movies is they get students to see the wonder and the humanity in cultures that would otherwise seem foreign, insignificant, and irrelevant. However, teaching history with Disney might sound good in theory, but putting it into practice can be somewhat difficult. If you are using Disney to teach, you want to make sure that the movies are a legitimate teaching tool and not just idle entertainment. And if you are teaching about other cultures and their stories, you want to make sure that students come to know the real cultures and the real stories and not simply Disney-fied versions of them. That is why I would like to share some ideas and resources for how to teach social studies with Disney. As I continue putting out videos with this channel, I will continue to make videos about the when and where behind Disney movies, but I will also make videos sharing some ideas and resources for how to teach with Disney. I am no longer teaching my History Through Disney elective course, but I believe that some of the materials I have encountered and accumulated along the way could help some of you out there as you try to engage the young people in your life with the study of history. So if you are interested in learning about that and getting access to those resources, please subscribe to my channel and look out for future content. I'll be sharing a few of the things that I have made and used in my own classes, but I'll also be pointing you to things that you can find elsewhere for free, if not for very cheap. So thank you as always for watching. I look forward to releasing this material and also learning from you what ideas and content you have created that might be relevant to using Disney in the classroom. As always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.